Elon Musk walked into the grand courtroom of the San Francisco Federal Building, his presence instantly drawing whispers from the gathered spectators. Unlike the polished legal teams that typically accompanied billionaires in high-stakes cases, Musk entered alone, wearing a simple dark suit without a tie, his expression unreadable. Judge Beatrix Thornwald, a seasoned legal veteran with 30 years on the bench, observed him with mild amusement as he took his seat at the defendant's table. She had seen countless tech moguls, celebrities, and powerful figures pass through her courtroom, but never had she encountered one who chose to defend himself in such a complex patent dispute. Her initial smirk deepened as she glanced at the case files. Magnatech Industries versus Musk Innovations, a high-profile lawsuit with millions of dollars at stake. The courtroom buzzed as legal analysts, reporters, and curious onlookers leaned forward, eager to witness the unfolding drama. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Thornwald rapped her gavel, the sharp sound echoing through the chamber. "Mr. Musk," she addressed him, her tone edged with skepticism, "my records show that you are representing yourself today. Is that correct?" Musk stood up, his posture relaxed but confident. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied, his voice steady yet unassuming. A hushed murmur spread across the room, and even the court reporter raised an eyebrow at his audacity. Thornwald leaned back slightly, studying him with intrigue. "Bold choice," she remarked dryly, before shifting her attention to Magnatech's lead attorney, Dominic Reeves, who stood poised and ready, exuding the polished confidence of a seasoned litigator. The contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Musk, appearing unprepared and out of place, against Reeves, a legal heavyweight armed with a meticulously constructed case. The trial had just begun, but already Judge Thornwald suspected this would be one to remember. Judge Beatrix Thornwald had presided over countless trials in her 30-year career, and in that time she had seen it all. Tech billionaires flaunting their wealth, high-profile celebrities trying to charm their way out of trouble, and crooked politicians who thought they were above the law. Nothing impressed her anymore, and certainly nothing intimidated her. She had built a reputation for being sharp, no-nonsense, and utterly unimpressed by status or fortune. So when Elon Musk walked into her courtroom, alone, without a high-powered legal team by his side, she couldn't suppress the small smirk that flickered across her lips. "Another rich man who thought the rules didn't apply to him," she mused. Her skepticism only grew when Musk confirmed that he was representing himself in a case as intricate as a patent dispute, a field notorious for its complexity and legal loopholes. Patent law was not something an amateur could simply figure out as they went along. And yet, here was one of the world's most well-known billionaires, acting as if he could casually stroll in and outmaneuver seasoned attorneys. Thornwald had no patience for arrogance in her courtroom, and from where she sat, Musk's decision seemed not only reckless but borderline foolish. She had seen people underestimate the legal system before, and it never ended well for them. As she glanced at Dominic Reeves, Magnatech's lead attorney, she noticed the satisfied gleam in his eyes. He clearly believed this case would be an easy win. But despite her initial doubts, something about Musk's demeanor unsettled her. He wasn't nervous or flustered, nor did he seem overconfident. There was something unreadable in his expression, something she couldn't quite place, and it left her with the faintest, most fleeting hint of doubt. The courtroom fell into an expectant hush as Judge Beatrix Thornwald adjusted her glasses and glanced at the case file before her. "Case number 2025, CV 7842, she announced, her voice sharp and authoritative. "Magnatech Industries versus Musk Innovations." At the plaintiff's table, Dominic Reeves, a tall and polished attorney with years of experience in corporate litigation, rose smoothly to his feet. With his sleek gray hair and an expensive tailored suit, he exuded the quiet confidence of a man who had never lost a case of this magnitude. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and commanding, "this case is quite simple. My client, Magnatech Industries, holds an exclusive patent on a revolutionary battery technology, one that represents years of investment, research, and innovation. Unfortunately, Mr. Musk's company, Musk Innovations, has unlawfully appropriated this technology and is now attempting to pass it off as their own. We have the patent, we have the proof, and by the end of this trial, the facts will speak for themselves." Reeves delivered the statement with measured precision, his gaze momentarily flickering toward Musk, who sat at the defendant's table, absently shuffling through a few wrinkled papers. From an outsider's perspective, the contrast between the two men was almost laughable. One a composed and meticulously prepared legal professional, the other a distracted billionaire seemingly out of his depth. Judge Thornwald nodded, taking in the information as she turned her attention to Musk. "Mr. Musk," she said, her tone carrying a subtle edge of amusement, "you may now present your opening statement." Musk stood, adjusting the papers in his hands, and cleared his throat. His voice was quieter than expected as he began. "Your Honor, I am here today because Magnatech is trying to steal what my team created." He hesitated, glancing at his notes as he fumbled through the next words, while a few muffled chuckles rippled through the gallery. Judge Thornwald's skepticism deepened. If this was how Musk intended to defend himself, he had already lost. Dominic Reeves stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had already won. The courtroom was his stage, and he knew exactly how to command it. "Your Honor, members of the court," he began, his voice crisp and authoritative. "This case is about intellectual theft, plain and simple. My client, Magnatech Industries, invested millions into research and development, only to have their breakthrough battery technology copied by Musk Innovations. We hold the legal patent, we have the evidence, and we will demonstrate, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Mr. Musk's company has unlawfully replicated our proprietary design. By the time this trial concludes, the truth will be undeniable." Reeves gestured smoothly toward his team, where assistants were already preparing neatly stacked documents and polished digital presentations. His tone carried an air of inevitability, as though he were merely walking through the motions of a case that had already been decided. Judge Beatrix Thornwald gave a small nod, acknowledging the statement, then turned toward the defendant's table. "Mr. Musk," she said, her eyes lingering on him with a hint of curiosity, "you may present your opening statement." Musk stood slowly, pulling a few crumpled papers from his pocket, one slipping from his grasp and floating to the floor. Someone in the gallery snickered. He bent down, retrieved it, then glanced at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat. I'm here today because Magnatech is trying to take credit for something my team actually created." He fumbled with his papers, losing his place, and an awkward silence stretched across the courtroom. A few more chuckles broke out, and even Judge Thornwald's lips twitched slightly. If this was his strategy, it wasn't working. From the plaintiff's table, Reeves exchanged a knowing glance with his client, Victor Hammond, who smirked. This was going to be easier than they had anticipated. Elon Musk shifted uncomfortably as he flipped through the wrinkled pages of his notes, his hands moving with an air of hesitation that only added to the growing skepticism in the courtroom. "The battery design in question," he began, glancing up at Judge Beatrix Thornwald, who was already regarding him with thinly veiled impatience, "uses a special coating that, improves efficiency." He paused, rifling through his papers again. "I have a diagram somewhere." He checked one pocket, then another, before finally pulling out a crumpled sheet, unfolding it hastily. Someone in the gallery let out a barely contained chuckle, and from the plaintiff's table, Dominic Reeves smirked, exchanging a knowing glance with his client. Victor Hammond, who sat relaxed as if the case had already been won. "Mr. Musk," Judge Thornwald interjected, her voice edged with disbelief. "This is a courtroom, not a product demonstration. Do you have your evidence organized and ready to present?" Musk nodded quickly, but as he shuffled his papers, another sheet slipped to the floor. Prompting a fresh wave of hushed laughter from the spectators, the judge sighed and raised her hand for silence. "Perhaps," she said, barely hiding her amusement, "you should have considered hiring an attorney. Patent law is not something most people can improvise." Musk's lips pressed into a thin line as he finally straightened his papers, taking a deep breath. "I understand, Your Honor," he said, his voice quieter now, but even as he stumbled through his explanation, failing to articulate a solid defense, there was something odd about his demeanor. His apparent confusion never crossed the line into outright panic. In fact, as the trial progressed, there were moments, brief flickers, where his eyes seemed too focused, too calculated, as if he were observing rather than struggling. Judge Thornwald noticed it too, though she dismissed it as wishful thinking. A man who couldn't even keep his notes in order had no business thinking he could win against a corporate giant like Magnatech. As the plaintiff's attorneys wheeled in sleek, organized evidence boxes and set up digital presentations, Musk merely nodded, taking notes on a legal pad, his face betraying nothing. The courtroom's attention had already shifted toward Magnatech's seemingly airtight case. But Musk's apparent incompetence was not as genuine as it seemed. Beneath the surface of his fumbling, a trap was quietly being set, one that no one, especially Judge Thornwald, saw coming. Dominic Reeves sat back in his chair, the corners of his mouth twitching in amusement as he watched Elon Musk fumble with his papers. This was going to be easier than he had anticipated. He had faced formidable opponents before, ruthless corporate lawyers, government prosecutors, even brilliant independent litigators who had spent years honing their craft. But this was hardly a challenge. Musk looked every bit the part of an overconfident billionaire who had convinced himself that intelligence in one field translated seamlessly to another. But Reeves knew better. Patent law was not a game for amateurs. It required precision, meticulous preparation, and an intimate understanding of legal precedents that Musk clearly lacked. Reeves had built his career on dismantling weaker opponents, and this case would be no different. From the moment Musk dropped his papers, fumbled his words, and hesitated under the judge's scrutiny, Reeves knew he had already won. He leaned toward his client, Victor Hammond, and whispered, "He's exactly what we thought, completely out of his depth." Hammond smirked, crossing his arms as he watched Musk struggle to form a coherent sentence. The courtroom had already turned against him. Even Judge Thornwald, a woman known for her professionalism, couldn't quite hide her amusement. The gallery chuckled at Musk's expense, and Reeves let them. He wanted this to feel like a slaughter, wanted the court to see that there was no contest here. Musk had made the fatal mistake of thinking he could outmaneuver a legal powerhouse with sheer willpower alone. And Reeves was more than happy to teach him a lesson in humility. As Magnatech's legal team wheeled in their neatly organized evidence, Reeves adjusted his tie, preparing for a swift and decisive victory. Lila Chin sat stiffly in the gallery, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she watched Elon Musk stumble through his opening statement. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had seen Musk in high-pressure situations before, boardroom negotiations, late-night problem-solving sessions, even moments when critical systems failed right before a product launch, but never like this. He was always sharp, always decisive, yet here, in front of Judge Thornwald, he looked unprepared, distracted, and alarmingly vulnerable. Leela could feel the weight of the courtroom's judgment pressing down on him, the murmurs of amusement, the skeptical glances exchanged between Magnatech's attorneys, and the thinly veiled smirk on Dominic Reeves' face. She wanted to believe this was all part of some grand strategy, that Musk had a plan buried beneath the chaos of his disorganized papers and hesitant words. But doubt was creeping in. Was he really trying to handle this alone? The stakes were too high for mistakes, and yet, mistake after mistake was all she could see. When Judge Thornwald sighed and suggested Musk should have hired a lawyer, Lila's stomach twisted. That wasn't just a passing remark, it was a warning. A courtroom was no place for improvisation, especially against a company as ruthless as Magnatech. Musk finally sat down, still scribbling something in his notebook, but his expression gave nothing away. Lila stole a glance at Hammond, whose smug confidence sent another wave of dread through her. If Musk didn't turn this around, they weren't just going to lose the case, they were going to lose everything. Judge Beatrix Thornwald had encountered more than her fair share of overconfident billionaires who thought they could bend the rules to their will, and from the moment Elon Musk walked into her courtroom alone, she had pegged him as one of them. In her 30 years on the bench, she had seen it all. CEOs who believed their wealth placed them above the law, celebrities who thought charm could sway a ruling, and politicians who assumed power equated to immunity. Musk fit neatly into that category. His decision to represent himself in a complex patent case reeked of arrogance, a belief that his success in one field automatically granted him expertise in another. As he fumbled through his papers and stumbled over his words, Thornwald struggled to take him seriously. She had expected a high-powered legal team, a carefully crafted defense, or at the very least, a competent argument. Instead, she got this: a billionaire who seemed as unprepared as a first-year law student. When she suggested he should have hired an attorney, It wasn't just a remark. It was a warning. This court had no patience for hubris, and if Musk thought he could talk his way out of this, he was in for a rude awakening. 6 months earlier, in a brightly lit lab filled with the hum of high-tech machinery, Elon Musk and Lila Chen stood over a small metallic device no bigger than a shoebox. It didn't look like much, just a sleek metal casing with intricate wiring running along its surface, but they both knew it had the potential to change everything. "Run the test again," Musk said, his voice quiet but intense, his gaze never leaving the device. Lila tapped on her tablet, initiating the sequence, and the edges of the device glowed faintly blue. She watched the data stream in real time. "Power output is stable at 98% efficiency," she reported, barely able to keep the excitement out of her voice. "That's 3 times better than anything on the market." Musk nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "If we scale this," he murmured, "we could power an entire house for a month with something the size of a brick, a car for 1,000 miles. He didn't smile. He rarely did when he was deep in thought, but the spark in his eyes told Lila everything she needed to know. This was it. This was the breakthrough they had been chasing for years. The key was in the nano-coating they had developed, an ultra-thin layer of graphene-infused material that dramatically increased energy storage while reducing heat buildup. It was revolutionary, the kind of leap forward that didn't just improve existing technology but rewrote the rules entirely. Lila exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what they had just achieved. "We actually did it," she whispered, still staring at the numbers on her screen as if they might change. Musk's phone buzzed on the table, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Victor Hammond is here," he said. Lila's expression darkened. "Magnatech CEO? Why?" "He wants to talk about a partnership," Musk said, already standing. Lila hesitated, her excitement now tempered with caution. "Elon, Magnatech has a history of stealing designs, you know that." Musk met her eyes for a moment, then nodded. "I know. Cover this up," he instructed, gesturing to the device. "I'll handle Hammond." He turned and left the lab, his mind already shifting gears. As he walked down the corridor, he considered the implications of their discovery. If they moved forward with this, it wouldn't just disrupt the energy market, it would redefine it. And that meant competitors like Magnatech wouldn't just watch from the sidelines, they would try to take it. The only question was when. Victor Hammond strode into Musk Innovations headquarters with the polished confidence of a man who was used to getting his way. Dressed in a tailored navy suit with a crisp white shirt, he radiated power and influence, his smile just the right mix of charm and authority. 2 assistants flanked him, each carrying sleek tablets, their fingers already poised to take notes. "Elon," Hammond greeted as Musk met him in the glass-walled conference room. His handshake was firm, his grin easy. "Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy man." Musk, ever the pragmatist, wasted no time with pleasantries. "What can I do for you, Victor?" he asked, his tone neutral as he gestured toward a seat. Hammond didn't sit right away. Instead, his eyes flicked around the room as if absorbing every detail, every piece of technology in sight. "I'll get right to it," he said, finally lowering himself into the chair. "Magnatech wants to partner with you on energy storage. We've been keeping an eye on your recent developments. Impressive work, by the way, and we think there's a real opportunity here." Musk said nothing, simply watching him. Hammond continued, "You have the creativity, the vision. We have the manufacturing power and distribution networks to bring your ideas to market faster and at scale. Together, we could revolutionize the industry." The words were rehearsed, smooth, but Musk wasn't fooled. He had seen this tactic before, the careful flattery, the offer of partnership. It was all just a way to get closer, to extract information before moving in for the kill. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Interesting," he said slowly. "What did you have in mind?" Hammond's smile widened, but there was something predatory beneath it. "A tour," he said casually. "I'd love to see what you're working on firsthand. Just a quick walkthrough, nothing too formal." Musk studied him for a long moment. He had no doubt that Hammond's real goal wasn't collaboration, but intelligence gathering. If given the chance, he would take everything he saw and find a way to replicate it. Musk forced a polite nod. "A quick tour," he agreed, "but some areas are off-limits. Ongoing research." Hammond chuckled, as if that was expected. "Of course," he said easily, but as they moved through the facility, Musk noticed how Hammond lingered in certain areas, how his assistants subtly turned their tablets at angles that could capture images. More than once, Musk caught Hammond peering too long through windows into restricted labs, his expression shifting from admiration to calculation. Musk made a mental note. By the time the tour ended, Hammond extended his hand again. "This was great," he said. "I'll have my people call your people and we'll work out the details." Musk shook his hand, but his mind was already elsewhere. He had seen enough to confirm his suspicions. As soon as Hammond left the building, Musk turned to his security chief. "Pull all surveillance footage from today," he ordered. "Every second." That night, alone in his office, Musk watched the footage frame by frame, his expression unreadable as he saw exactly what he had expected. Hammond's assistant snapping photos, Hammond himself glancing at things he had no business looking at. Musk's jaw tightened. "I knew it," he murmured. He had just been robbed in broad daylight. Now it was only a matter of time before Magnatech made its next move. That night, Elon Musk sat alone in his office, the glow of multiple screens casting sharp shadows across his face as he meticulously reviewed the surveillance footage from earlier that day. Frame by frame, he watched Victor Hammond move through the facility, the man's confident stride masking an agenda Musk had seen play out before. At first glance, the visit seemed innocuous, just a CEO taking a professional interest in potential collaboration. But Musk had been in this game too long to believe in coincidences. As the footage played, the real picture began to emerge. Hammond's eyes darted toward restricted areas more often than they should have, lingering at reinforced doors that led to confidential projects. He moved at a measured pace, his casual conversation barely disguising his clear attempts to absorb as much detail as possible. More telling was his assistant, a sharp, efficient woman in a dark blazer who, despite appearing to take notes on her tablet, subtly angled it at various pieces of equipment, capturing images without drawing attention. Musk zoomed in on a specific moment when Hammond stood outside the main lab, where the breakthrough battery technology was being developed. Though he had been told this area was off-limits, he took a step closer, pretending to adjust his cuff while glancing through the narrow glass window. His assistant, standing just behind him, tapped on her tablet with deliberate precision. Musk rewound the footage and played it again. There, just as Hammond leaned in slightly, his assistant tilted her screen ever so subtly, snapping what was likely a high-resolution image of the work inside. Musk clenched his jaw, his fingers tapping rhythmically against his desk. He switched to another camera angle and found an even more damning moment. Hammond and his team walking back through the corridor, whispering amongst themselves. Hammond's lips moved, and though the audio was non-existent, Musk could read it clearly. "We have enough." Enough for what? Musk didn't need to guess. They had come not for partnership but for reconnaissance. A week from now, a month, maybe longer, Magnatech would file a patent or announce a breakthrough of their own. Musk knew the pattern well. Big corporations stealing innovation from smaller, more agile teams, disguising it under layers of legal technicalities. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. If Hammond thought he had won, he was mistaken. Musk didn't just build things. He anticipated, adapted, and stayed 10 steps ahead. With a click, he saved the footage to a secure drive and picked up his phone. "Lila," he said as soon as she answered. "It's happening!" There was a pause on the other end before she spoke. "They stole it?" "Not yet," Musk replied, his voice calm but cold. "But they will, and when they do, we'll be ready." Elon Musk sat in his office long after the rest of the building had gone quiet, his eyes locked on the screens in front of him as he meticulously combed through the security footage from Victor Hammond's visit. He had already watched it once, but this time, he scrutinized every second with a sharper focus. Frame by frame, he observed the calculated movements, the subtle glances toward restricted areas, the lingering hesitation outside the main lab, the way Hammond's assistant discreetly angled her tablet in seemingly random directions. To an untrained eye, it was nothing more than a routine business visit. but Musk knew better. He rewound a clip, zooming in on the moment Hammond paused by the reinforced glass of the restricted research lab. Though the door was clearly labeled "Authorized Personnel Only," Hammond had still taken a step forward, pretending to check his watch while shifting just enough to get a peek inside. His assistant, standing beside him, made what looked like an innocuous adjustment to her tablet, but Musk recognized the movement. It was a quick capture, a method used to discreetly take photos without raising suspicion. Musk exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the desk. Switching screens, he accessed the company's email logs, searching for any communication between Magnatech employees that might confirm his suspicions. It didn't take long. A flagged email from one of Magnatech's internal threads caught his eye. It was from Hammond's assistant, sent just hours after their visit. "We need to expedite. I'll send the visuals separately. Timeline has moved up." Musk's jaw tightened. Visuals. The word alone told him everything he needed to know. Whatever images they had taken inside his facility, they were already being processed. He continued scanning emails, finding more internal messages exchanged between Magnatech executives. One from Hammond himself was particularly damning. "I don't care what legal says. We need this technology before Musk locks it down. Figure it out." Musk leaned back, folding his arms. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was proof. Hammond hadn't come looking for a partnership. He had come to steal. And now, Musk had the evidence he needed to stop him before it was too late. Elon Musk scrolled through the intercepted internal emails from Magnatech, his expression unreadable as the pieces of the puzzle finally aligned. What had started as a suspicion was now undeniable proof. Victor Hammond had no intention of working with Musk Innovations. He had come to steal. The emails were a goldmine of damning evidence, each one more revealing than the last. One particularly telling message was from Hammond's assistant, sent just hours after their visit to Musk's facility. "We have what we need. Visuals are being processed. Expect preliminary analysis by the end of the week." Musk's eyes narrowed at the wording. Visuals. It confirmed that the stolen data wasn't just notes or memories. It was tangible, likely high-resolution images taken during their so-called tour. He scrolled further, stopping at another email from a Magnatech R&D executive. "The coding process is the key. Musk's team cracked the energy density issue. If we replicate it before they patent it, we control the market." That was it. That was their plan. They weren't just trying to compete. They were racing to file a patent on something they didn't even invent. Musk's fingers tightened into a fist as he opened another thread labeled "Urgent Strategic Implementation" from Hammond himself. "We can't afford to wait for legal clearance. If Musk's team files first, it's over. Move forward with reverse engineering immediately." Musk's pulse remained steady, but his mind was already racing ahead. If Magnatech was moving this fast, it meant they were already working to claim ownership of his technology, disguising it under minor modifications to avoid legal scrutiny. They were using corporate espionage as a shortcut, and they thought they could get away with it. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They underestimated him. Musk closed the emails, exhaling slowly. They thought they had the advantage, but he had something far more valuable than stolen images or rushed patents. He had the truth, and now he was going to make sure the whole world saw it. Elon Musk sat in his office, his fingers steepled as he considered his next move. The evidence against Magnatech was strong. Security footage, leaked emails, and undeniable proof of their attempt to steal his company's breakthrough battery technology. But exposing them wouldn't be enough. If he went straight to court with this, Hammond's team of lawyers would bury the case in procedural delays, countersuits, and corporate loopholes. They would deny, distort, and spin the narrative until the truth became just another boardroom dispute lost in the noise of the legal system. No, Musk needed a strategy, one that wouldn't just prove Magnatech's theft, but would leave them completely exposed without any escape route. He leaned forward, flipping open a legal textbook, one of many that now littered his desk. For weeks he had been studying patent law, researching every obscure clause, every case precedent that could be used as a weapon. That was when he found it. Section 47B of the Technological Innovation Protection Act. It was an underutilized clause that allowed a court to impose a multi-year ban on a company caught engaging in corporate espionage, preventing them from developing or marketing a stolen technology for up to 5 years. It was exactly what he needed. If he could prove Magnatech's theft in court, it wouldn't just cost them money, it would cripple their entire energy division for half a decade. That was the real punishment, one that no settlement could undo. Musk sat back, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He had Magnatech exactly where he wanted them. But to make this work, he couldn't just reveal his cards all at once. He needed Hammond to believe he had already won. He needed the court, the media, and even Judge Thornwald to see him as the underdog. Unprepared, disorganized, out of his depth. Only then, when Magnatech was at its most overconfident, would he strike. He picked up his notebook, flipping through pages of carefully laid out arguments, evidence points, and cross-examination strategies. He wasn't just going to defend himself, he was going to turn this entire trial into a trap. And by the time Hammond realized it, it would be far too late. In the quiet of a restricted lab deep inside Musk Innovations, Lila Chen worked meticulously, her fingers moving swiftly over the delicate wiring of a compact prototype. This wasn't just any device. It was the key to Elon Musk's entire courtroom strategy, a demonstration that would prove beyond any legal doubt that Magnatech had stolen their technology. While Magnatech had been busy trying to reverse engineer stolen images and fabricate a patent claim, Musk's team had been perfecting the real breakthrough. The device before her, no larger than a shoebox, contained the true innovation, the revolutionary nano-coating technology that allowed their battery to store triple the energy of anything else on the market. Musk stood over her shoulder, watching intently. "It has to be flawless," he said. Leela nodded, double-checking the calibration. "We've run the numbers. Once we activate it in court, they won't have any way to refute what they stole." Musk glanced at the encrypted drive sitting beside the prototype. On it were timestamps, lab logs, and digital records proving his team had developed this technology months before Magnatech's so-called breakthrough. But the real impact would come when the demonstration exposed how identical Magnatech's copy was, down to the structural layout, internal wiring, and chemical composition. Musk picked up the device carefully, turning it over in his hands. "This isn't just evidence," he said quietly. "It's checkmate." Lila exhaled, sitting back. "Let's hope Judge Thornwald sees it that way." Musk didn't reply, but the determined glint in his eyes made one thing clear. This wasn't hope, this was certainty. The courtroom was already tense when Elon Musk stood from his seat, but his next words sent a ripple of shock through the gallery. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "I'd like to call a surprise witness, Priya Nair, former head of research and development at Magnatech Industries." A wave of murmurs erupted across the room as reporters scribbled notes and legal analysts exchanged wide-eyed glances. At the plaintiff's table, Dominic Reeves shot up from his seat. "Objection, Your Honor. This witness was not disclosed to the court or to the defense in advance." Judge Beatrix Thornwald peered down at Musk with narrowed eyes, clearly unimpressed by the breach of protocol. "Mr. Musk, this is not a television drama. Witnesses must be disclosed before trial." But Musk didn't flinch. "I understand, Your Honor," he said smoothly, "but these are extraordinary circumstances. Ms. Nair only came forward after hearing Magnatech's testimony yesterday. She has information that is directly relevant to this case and speaks to the truth behind Magnatech's patent claim." Judge Thornwald studied him for a long moment, then turned to Reeves. "Mr. Reeves, unless you can prove that her testimony would be irrelevant, I'm inclined to allow it." Reeves clenched his jaw. He knew what this meant. Musk had blindsided them, and there was no time to prepare a proper counter. "Your Honor, Ms. Nair is bound by a confidentiality agreement. She cannot legally testify about Magnatech's research." Musk folded his arms. "Actually, she can. According to corporate law, NDAs do not protect illegal activity, including corporate espionage." Judge Thornwald tapped her fingers against the bench, then nodded. "I'll allow the witness, but this better be worth my time, Mr. Musk." A court officer opened the side door and Priya Nair stepped into the room. She walked with quiet confidence, her sharp eyes scanning the courtroom, before settling on Hammond, who had gone visibly pale. Musk watched the reaction with satisfaction. The game had just changed, and Magnatech knew it. Priya Nair settled into the witness stand, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with speculation only moments ago, fell into a tense silence as Judge Beatrix Thornwald motioned for the proceedings to continue. "Ms. Nair," Elon Musk said as he approached the stand, his voice calm but deliberate, "can you please state your former position at Magnatech Industries for the record?" Priya nodded. "I was the head of research and development for 8 years," she said clearly. "I oversaw multiple projects, including advanced energy storage solutions." Musk clasped his hands behind his back. "And during your time at Magnatech, were you ever involved in the development of the battery technology that is currently the subject of this lawsuit?" Priya's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, but not in the way Magnatech has claimed." A murmur spread through the courtroom, but Judge Thornwald raised a hand, silencing it. "Explain," Musk prompted. Priya took a steadying breath. Magnatech did not develop the nano-coating battery technology on its own. That technology was observed at Musk Innovations during a facility visit by CEO Victor Hammond and later reverse-engineered under his direct orders. The room erupted. A mixture of gasps, hurried whispers, and the furious scratching of reporters' pens filled the air. Dominic Reeves shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor! This is an outrageous accusation, with no supporting evidence." Judge Thornwald's sharp glare cut through the noise. "Order!" she commanded, striking her gavel twice. The courtroom stilled, and she turned her attention back to Priya Nair. "Do you have proof to support your claim?" Priya nodded. "I saved internal communications, meeting notes, and project timelines. I also have direct email correspondence from Victor Hammond instructing us to recreate what we saw at Musk Innovations before they had a chance to patent it." She reached down and lifted a folder from her lap, handing it to the court clerk, who passed it to Judge Thornwald. The judge flipped through the documents, her brows furrowing. The weight of the moment was sinking in. Musk took a step closer. "To be absolutely clear, Ms. Nair, are you stating under oath that Magnatech had no prior development of this technology before Hammond's visit to my facility?" Priya met his gaze without hesitation. "Yes. Before that visit, we were pursuing entirely different battery advancements. After the visit, Hammond called an emergency meeting, showed us images his assistant had taken inside your lab, and told us to replicate the technology as fast as possible." This time, the courtroom didn't just murmur. It roared. Victor Hammond, who had been sitting rigidly at the plaintiff's table, now looked as if all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. Judge Thornwald, still reading the documents, slowly closed the folder and set it down. She lifted her gaze to Hammond, and for the first time since the trial began, the weight of the court shifted. Musk wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was exposing Magnatech for exactly what they were. Elon Musk remained calm as the murmurs in the courtroom died down, letting Priya Nair's shocking testimony settle over the room like a thick fog. He could see the cracks forming. Judge Beatrix Thornwald's once skeptical gaze now sharp with scrutiny. Magnatech's lead attorney Dominic Reeves shifting uncomfortably in his chair, and Victor Hammond, whose once smug expression had transformed into something bordering on panic. But words alone weren't enough. He needed to make the truth undeniable. Taking a deep breath, Musk turned to the judge. "Your Honor, in light of Ms. Nair's testimony, I would like to present visual evidence to confirm Magnatech's unauthorized attempt to steal our technology." Judge Thornwald gave him a measured look, then nodded. "Proceed." Musk walked over to the courtroom's large screen and connected his laptop. The screen flickered to life and a grainy security camera feed appeared. "This footage," Musk explained, "was taken from Musk Innovations' security system on the day of Victor Hammond's visit to our facility." He pressed play, and the courtroom watched as the scene unfolded. On the screen, Hammond and his assistant moved through Musk's research lab, pretending to engage in casual conversation. But as the footage zoomed in, it became obvious what was happening. Hammond's assistant subtly tilted her tablet, its reflective screen revealing the telltale motion of a camera application running. Every few steps, she would pause, angle the screen ever so slightly, and capture images of restricted areas, internal schematics, and prototype devices. Musk glanced at the judge, whose face had hardened. "Let's fast forward a bit," he said, scrubbing through the footage. The next clip showed Hammond himself, standing outside a restricted lab, pretending to adjust his cuff while peering through a small observation window. His assistant, standing just behind him, tapped on her tablet. Musk froze the frame. "Notice the angle of the reflection?" he pointed out. "She's not checking notes, she's taking photos." A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Even the spectators, who had been whispering among themselves, now sat motionless, eyes fixed on the damning evidence. But Musk wasn't finished. "Now," he continued, "let's look at what happened just minutes after they left the building." Another feed played, this time from a different camera, showing Hammond and his team walking briskly through the parking lot. Musk zoomed in on Hammond's lips, then pressed another button. A subtitle appeared beneath the footage, generated from advanced lip-reading software. It read, "We have enough." Gasps spread through the courtroom. Hammond's face turned ghostly pale. "Your Honor," Musk said, stepping back toward the defense table, "this is not speculation. This is espionage, deliberate, calculated theft of proprietary technology. And Magnatech knew exactly what they were doing." Judge Thornwald exhaled sharply, closing her eyes for a brief moment before turning her attention to Reeves. "Mr. Reeves," she said coldly, "you may want to rethink your defense." The case had just turned against them. Judge Beatrix Thornwald sat motionless for a moment, her fingers lightly tapping against the edge of her bench as she processed everything that had just unfolded before her. When Elon Musk had first walked into her courtroom without a lawyer, she had assumed he was just another overconfident billionaire who believed he could outthink the legal system. She had expected arrogance, recklessness, maybe even incompetence. But not this. What had started as a seemingly lopsided case had now shifted in a way she hadn't anticipated. The video footage Musk had just presented wasn't circumstantial. It was clear, undeniable proof that Magnatech's executives had engaged in corporate espionage. The damning images of Victor Hammond's assistant secretly capturing photos, the surveillance clips of Hammond peering into restricted areas, and the recorded transcript of him saying, "We have enough," painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Thornwald's initial impression of Musk, inexperienced and out of his depth, was rapidly unraveling. She glanced toward Hammond, who now sat rigid in his seat, his once confident demeanor reduced to visible tension. Reeves, Magnatech's lead attorney, was stiff, his mind clearly scrambling for a counter-argument. Meanwhile, Musk remained composed, standing calmly at the defense table, his expression unreadable but unwavering. He wasn't fumbling anymore. He wasn't confused, and for the first time, Judge Thornwald realized something she should have seen from the beginning. He had never been out of his depth at all. He had played them. The entire courtroom had underestimated him, and now they were paying the price for it. Musk had let Magnatech's attorneys become overconfident, lulled them into believing he was unprepared, and then dismantled them piece by piece with irrefutable evidence. Thornwald folded her hands, looking at him with new eyes. Perhaps Musk wasn't just a billionaire with a reckless streak. Perhaps he was something far more dangerous. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing, and now, for the first time since the trial began, she found herself wondering just how much further ahead he had already planned. Elon Musk adjusted his papers with a quiet confidence that had been missing at the start of the trial. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. No longer was he the fumbling billionaire who seemed in over his head. Now he was in full control. He could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, from Judge Beatrix Thornwald's newly attentive expression to the barely concealed panic on Victor Hammond's face. Magnatech had been playing offense since the beginning, believing they were closing in on an easy victory. But they hadn't accounted for what was coming next. Musk turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, given the overwhelming evidence presented today, including direct proof of Magnatech's corporate espionage, I am requesting a specific legal remedy that falls under Section 47B of the Technological Innovation Protection Act of 2018. A brief pause followed. Thornwald narrowed her eyes slightly. "Section 47B?" she repeated, clearly searching her legal memory for the statute. Across the courtroom, Magnatech's attorney, Dominic Reeves, frowned in confusion. "That's correct, Your Honor," Musk continued. "Section 47B was added as an amendment to the original act to address corporate espionage cases involving stolen technological advancements. It allows the court to impose not only financial damages but also an operational restriction on the offending party. Specifically, if a company is found guilty of misappropriating proprietary technology, the court has the authority to bar them from developing, manufacturing, or selling any related product for a period of up to 5 years." A wave of stunned murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Hammond, who had spent most of the trial suppressing his emotions, visibly stiffened. Musk let the information sink in before continuing. "This isn't just about invalidating Magnatech's fraudulent patent," he said, turning his gaze toward Hammond. "It's about ensuring that there are real consequences for companies that attempt to bypass innovation through theft. If this court finds Magnatech guilty of corporate espionage, Section 47B provides the necessary framework to prohibit them from producing or profiting from any energy storage technology related to my company's stolen work for 5 years. Reeves shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is unprecedented. This statute is obscure and has never been applied in a case of this scale." Thornwald raised a hand, silencing him. "Sit down, Mr. Reeves. I'm well aware of how often this statute has been used, or rather, how often it has been ignored." She turned her gaze back to Musk. "I assume you have documentation to support your request?" Musk nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." He handed a thick folder to the court clerk, who delivered it to Thornwald. The judge flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing as she scanned the legal provisions, past case references, and analysis Musk had compiled. After a few moments, she closed the folder and exhaled slowly. "This is compelling." Reeves' jaw clenched. "Your Honor, applying Section 47B to this case would be catastrophic to my client's business. A 5-year ban from this sector would cripple Magnatech's energy division." "That's the point," Musk countered coolly. "Companies like Magnatech operate under the assumption that the worst consequence they'll face for intellectual theft is a fine they can easily afford. But Section 47B was designed to ensure that espionage isn't just a cost of doing business. It's a risk that can cost them their business." Thornwald looked between the two men, then turned to Hammond, whose face had gone pale. "Mr. Hammond," she said, her tone neutral but carrying weight, "it seems that your legal team has failed to anticipate this particular angle. Perhaps you should have spent more time preparing and less time stealing." The courtroom erupted into whispers, but Musk remained still, watching as the realization settled over his opponent. Magnatech had come into this fight thinking they could crush him with legal maneuvering. Instead, they were now staring down a ruling that could take them off the playing field entirely. And the best part? This wasn't a trick or a loophole. It was the law. One they had never bothered to see coming. The moment the implications of Section 47B settled over the courtroom, Victor Hammond leaned toward Dominic Reeves, his voice low but laced with urgency. "Fix this," he hissed, gripping the table so tightly his knuckles went white. Reeves, still reeling from the legal bombshell Musk had just dropped, forced himself to maintain composure, but it was clear the confidence he had carried throughout the trial had shattered. A 5-year prohibition from the energy storage sector wouldn't just be a legal setback, it would be catastrophic. Magnatech had invested billions into positioning itself as a leader in the industry, and with Musk's technology proving to be revolutionary, the market was about to shift entirely. If they were barred from competing, they wouldn't just lose, they would become obsolete. Reeves took a slow breath before rising to his feet. "Your Honor," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "given the unexpected nature of this request, we would like to request a recess to discuss potential resolution options with Mr. Musk." Musk tilted his head slightly, already knowing where this was going. Judge Beard Thornwald studied Reeves for a long moment before nodding. "You have 1 hour," she said, tapping her gavel. "Court is in recess." Hammond and Reeves wasted no time, practically cornering Musk the moment they stepped outside the courtroom doors. The energy in the air had shifted. Where Magnatech's representatives had once exuded smug superiority, now they carried a desperate edge. "Elon," Hammond began, his voice unnervingly friendly, as if they were old business partners. Let's be reasonable here. A 5-year ban? That's excessive. There has to be a way for both of us to walk away from this with something. Musk crossed his arms. You mean like how you walked away from my facility with stolen data? Hammond forced a chuckle, though it was clear he was struggling to maintain his usual charm. Look, we're both businessmen. We don't need to let this turn into a nuclear option. What if we offer you a licensing deal? Magnatech will acknowledge your ownership of the technology, pay royalties, and you still get to dominate the market. That way you make money and we stay in business. Musk didn't even blink. No. Hammond's smile faltered. No. Musk leaned in slightly. You tried to steal from me. You used corporate espionage, lied under oath, and only now, when you're cornered, do you want to negotiate? No. Reeves, sensing that Hammond's approach was failing, stepped in. Mr. Musk, let's not pretend there isn't room for compromise here. Lawsuits can drag on for years. Even if you win, appeals could stall enforcement. But a settlement? We can make this go away quickly. You get guaranteed compensation, and Magnatech avoids unnecessary losses. It's a win-win. Musk's expression remained unreadable. You're assuming I care about money, he said, his tone almost amused. You think this is about damages? No. This is about setting a precedent. If companies like yours believe they can steal innovation and get away with it by throwing money at the problem, then nothing ever changes. Hammond's patience finally snapped. For God's sake, Elon, everyone has a price. Name yours. Musk's gaze locked onto Hammond's, unflinching. The price is 5 years. Silence stretched between them. Hammond's jaw tightened, his frustration turning into something darker. He had spent his entire career making deals, manipulating leverage, outmaneuvering competitors. But now, standing before Musk, he realized he had no leverage left. Musk turned to leave. I'll see you in court. Elon Musk didn't even hesitate. No deal, he said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion as he stared down Victor Hammond and Dominic Reeves. The two men had cornered him in the hallway outside the courtroom, their carefully composed facades now cracking under the weight of desperation. Hammond's attempt at charm had already failed, and Reeves' appeal to legal pragmatism had fallen flat. Now they had nothing left but bargaining chips that Musk had no interest in. Elon, Hammond said again, trying to keep his voice measured, though a sharp edge of frustration was creeping in. Let's think this through. A 5-year ban would cripple Magnatech, and honestly, what good does that do for you? You're a businessman, not a grudge holder. What's better, watching our company collapse, or getting paid hundreds of millions in licensing fees while we acknowledge your ownership of the tech? Musk's lips curled slightly, almost amused. You still don't get it, do you? He said, tilting his head. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. It's about stopping companies like yours from treating intellectual theft as a minor inconvenience you can buy your way out of. You stole from me, Victor. You got caught. And now you're going to face the consequences. Reeves, ever the lawyer, tried a different approach. Mr. Musk, you're playing a dangerous game here. If you push this through, Magnatech won't just lose money. It could trigger layoffs, collapse supply chains, and hurt innocent employees who had nothing to do with this. Do you really want that on your hands? Musk's gaze darkened. Oh, so now you care about consequences? His voice was sharp, cutting through Reeves' practiced legalese like a blade. Where was this concern when your client was sneaking around my lab taking pictures? Where was it when you filed a fraudulent patent, trying to steal years of my team's work? Now that you're losing, you suddenly want to talk about collateral damage? He shook his head. No, Magnatech made its choices, and now they live with them. Hammond exhaled sharply, shoving his hands into his pockets as he tried to contain his growing anger. You think you're untouchable, don't you? He muttered. Just because you're ahead now doesn't mean you always will be. Musk arched an eyebrow. Is that a threat? Hammond's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. He didn't need to. The tension in the air spoke volumes. Reeves cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation back. Musk, let's be realistic here. Legal battles are long, exhausting, and expensive. Even if you win, appeals could delay enforcement. There's always risk, and fighting this all the way through could take years. But a settlement? You get paid now, and you avoid unnecessary litigation headaches. We can even negotiate an exclusivity clause. Magnatech agrees not to pursue any energy storage patents for a set period. It's a win-win." And Musk smirked. "You don't get it, do you?" He stepped forward, his presence almost overwhelming in its certainty. "I want this fight. I want this to go to trial. I want every tech company in the world to watch what happens when you try to steal from the wrong person. You think I'm worried about appeals? About delays? I don't need quick wins. I play the long game." Hammond's patience finally snapped. "Everybody has a price," he spat. Musk's expression didn't waver. "And yours," he said smoothly, "is 5 years." With that, he turned and walked back toward the courtroom. The negotiation was over. The fight was just beginning. Judge Beatrix Thornwald took a deep breath, adjusted her glasses, and glanced around the silent courtroom. The weight of her decision was palpable, and every eye in the room was locked on her. Just days ago, she had dismissed Elon Musk as another overconfident billionaire who thought he could outmaneuver the legal system without the proper expertise. But now, after witnessing the depth of his preparation, the strength of his evidence, and the audacity of his legal strategy, she saw him for what he truly was: a man who had turned this courtroom into a battlefield and outmaneuvered his opponents at every turn. She looked at Victor Hammond, whose once smug demeanor had crumbled into thinly veiled dread. Dominic Reeves sat beside him, no longer the composed, confident attorney he had been at the start of the trial, but a man who knew he was out of moves. Meanwhile, Musk sat at the defendant's table, calm, focused, as if he had already known the verdict long before she spoke a single word. Clearing her throat, she rapped her gavel once. "This court has carefully considered all evidence presented in this case, including direct testimony from Ms. Prianer, security footage confirming unauthorized data collection, internal Magnatech communications that explicitly discuss the theft of proprietary technology, and the defendant's legal argument under Section 47B of the Technological Innovation Protection Act." He turned her attention to the plaintiff's table, her expression firm. "The evidence establishes beyond any reasonable doubt that Magnatech Industries engaged in corporate espionage by unlawfully obtaining and attempting to patent technology developed exclusively by Musk Innovations. The plaintiff's claim to this patent is therefore fraudulent and invalid." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Thornwald wasn't finished. She shifted slightly in her chair, her gaze settling directly on Hammond. "Furthermore, given the severity of this misconduct, this court finds that the defendant's request under Section 47B is both valid and justified. As such, effective immediately, Magnatech Industries is prohibited from developing, manufacturing, or marketing any energy storage technology derived from the defendant's proprietary research for a period of 5 years." Gasps filled the room. Hammond visibly recoiled, his hands gripping the table as if he were trying to anchor himself to something solid. A 5-year ban was devastating. Not just a fine, not just a slap on the wrist, but an outright prohibition that would cripple Magnatech's energy division, possibly permanently. Thornwald let the reaction settle before continuing. "Additionally, Magnatech Industries is ordered to pay damages in the amount of $20 million to Musk Innovations for attempted patent fraud, legal expenses, and reputational harm incurred as a result of this case." At the plaintiff's table, Reeves inhaled sharply. A 5-year ban was already a death blow, but now a multi-million-dollar penalty on top of it? The weight of the ruling was clear. This wasn't just a victory for Musk, this was a message. Judge Thornwald sat back, exhaling as she removed her glasses. But before she adjourned, she turned her attention to Musk. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice softer than before, "I will admit, when this trial began, I doubted your ability to represent yourself. I assumed you were arrogant, unprepared. I was wrong. Your strategy, your legal argument, and your execution were some of the most methodical I have seen in my 30 years on this bench. You have not only defended your company, but also set a precedent that will have lasting consequences in the world of intellectual property law." Musk nodded slightly, the closest thing to gratitude he would show in a public courtroom. Judge Thornwald gave one final look around the room. "With that, this court is adjourned." She struck her gavel, and the case was over. Elon Musk had won. Completely. Victor Hammond sat motionless at the plaintiff's table, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The courtroom buzzed with frantic whispers, reporters scrambling to take notes, legal analysts murmuring about the precedent that had just been set. But Hammond barely heard any of it. His ears were still ringing with Judge Beatrick Thornwald's ruling. Magnatech's patent was invalidated, their energy division barred from developing battery technology for 5 years, and they owed Musk Innovations $20 million in damages. It was worse than a loss. It was annihilation. His fingers curled into fists as he stared at the table, his carefully constructed empire now teetering on the edge of collapse. 5 years in the tech world was an eternity. By the time Magnatech was legally allowed to re-enter the energy market, Musk Innovations would have advanced so far ahead that they'd never catch up. Investors would pull out, stock prices would plummet, and competitors would swoop in like vultures to pick apart whatever remained. For the first time in his career, Victor Hammond had lost. And not just a case, but everything. Dominic Reeves leaned in, his voice low but urgent. "Victor, we need to move quickly. We can appeal, file for an injunction to delay the enforcement of the ruling. There are options." "No," Hammond muttered, barely recognizing his own voice. It sounded hollow, detached. His mind wasn't just on the ruling, it was on the repercussions. Investors didn't tolerate failure at this scale. The board of directors wouldn't accept this. They had trusted him, believed in his leadership, and now, in one courtroom battle, he had led them into a disaster that could destroy the company. He pushed back from the table and stood abruptly, his movements stiff. He could feel the stares, the reporters waiting for a reaction, the Magnatech executive seated behind him whispering nervously. He had to leave before the cameras caught him unraveling. Without a word, he strode toward the exit, his jaw locked tight, his vision tunneled. Outside the courtroom, the consequences were already in motion. A Magnatech executive rushed toward him, his face pale. "Victor, the board wants an emergency meeting. Investors are demanding answers. Our stock is in free fall." Hammond held up a hand, silencing him. "Not here," he muttered. His mind was already racing, calculating his next move, but for the first time there wasn't a clear path forward. He had always been the one making the plays, setting the traps, but now he had walked straight into Musk's. As he stepped outside, the flashing of cameras blinded him. Reporters swarmed like sharks, microphones shoved toward his face. "Mr. Hammond, do you have a response to the court's ruling? Is Magnatech going to survive this? Will you resign?" He clenched his fists, his entire body vibrating with barely contained fury. Musk had done this to him. That arrogant, smug billionaire had played the long game, and Hammond had been too blind to see it. He had underestimated the man, thinking he was just another visionary too distracted by big ideas to understand corporate warfare. He had been wrong. And now, as he pushed through the crowd, his legacy was crumbling beneath him. The fallout from the trial was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of Judge Beatrick Thornwald's ruling, news alerts flooded social media, television broadcasts, and business networks, each headline more dramatic than the last. Elon Musk stuns court with legal genius, secures landmark victory over Magnatech. Corporate espionage exposed, Magnatech banned from energy market for 5 years. Musk's bold self-defense strategy reshapes patent law. The world had been watching, expecting a routine legal battle between two tech giants. But what they had witnessed was something far more extraordinary, an absolute dismantling of a corporation that had built its empire on backdoor deals and stolen innovation. Legal analysts wasted no time breaking down the ramifications. "This is unprecedented," one commentator on a major business network said. "Section 47B of the Technological Innovation Protection Act has never been used to this extent." Musk not only proved Magnatech's theft, but set a legal precedent that will make any company think twice before engaging in corporate espionage. Others marveled at Musk's strategy. "He played them," another expert noted. By appearing unprepared, he lulled Magnatech into overconfidence. He let them think they were winning, then dropped a bombshell they never saw coming. This wasn't just legal defense, it was strategic warfare. Social media exploded with reactions, memes, and admiration for Musk's unconventional yet brilliant approach. Elon Musk just pulled the biggest Uno reverse card in corporate history. They really thought they could outplay the guy who lands rockets backward. Musk walked in looking like he forgot his homework and walked out rewriting the textbook. Tech enthusiasts celebrated the victory as a major win for innovators over corporate giants, while entrepreneurs and startups saw it as a warning shot, proof that stealing intellectual property was no longer a risk-free gamble. But the most brutal fallout was for Magnatech. Within hours, their stock plummeted as panicked investors dumped shares. Financial analysts called it a catastrophic loss, estimating that the ruling would cost the company billions in long-term revenue. Business insiders speculated whether Magnatech's board would force Victor Hammond to resign, while others openly questioned if the company could even survive without its energy division. 5 years is a death sentence in this industry, one investor remarked. By the time they can legally re-enter the market, Musk technology will be years ahead. They're done. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, reporters clamored to get statements from both parties. Magnatech's legal team refused to comment, their expressions grim as they exited the courthouse. Victor Hammond, normally the picture of corporate confidence, ignored every question, his face locked in a furious scowl as he pushed through the crowd. Musk, on the other hand, exited with the same quiet confidence he had maintained throughout the trial. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Musk, was this your plan from the beginning? Do you think Magnatech will recover? What does this mean for the future of patent law?" Musk simply smirked, pausing for a single remark before stepping into his car. Justice was served. And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind a courtroom, a corporation, and an industry forever changed. As the courtroom emptied and the murmurs of the stunned spectators faded, Judge Beatrix Thornwald remained seated at her bench, watching Elon Musk gather his notes with a quiet, unshaken confidence. She had seen hundreds of cases in her 30-year career, but none had played out like this. None had so thoroughly dismantled her own initial assumptions. When Musk had first walked into her courtroom, fumbling papers, seemingly unprepared, she had dismissed him as yet another billionaire who thought he was smarter than the legal system. She had underestimated him just as Magnatech had, and just like them, she had been proven wrong. Taking a measured breath, she stood and stepped down from the bench, approaching Musk before he could leave. He turned as she neared, his expression unreadable, waiting. For the first time in years, Judge Thornwald found herself in an unfamiliar position in her own courtroom, one of humility. "Mr. Musk," she said, folding her hands in front of her, her voice quieter than before, less commanding. "Before you go, I want to say something that I don't often say." She paused, meeting his eyes. "I was wrong about you." Musk arched an eyebrow, though his expression remained neutral. "I misjudged you from the beginning," she continued. "I assumed you were reckless, that you had come into this courtroom with arrogance rather than strategy. I've seen many people try to outsmart the law, and I believed you were just another one of them." She exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "But what I witnessed over the last few days wasn't arrogance. It was something else entirely. You played this case brilliantly. You turned your greatest perceived weakness into your most powerful advantage. And, to be frank, I've seen veteran attorneys who couldn't have executed a case as flawlessly as you did." Musk studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod, accepting her words without gloating. "I appreciate that, Your Honor," he said simply. She hesitated for just a beat, then added, "I pride myself on being impartial, but I wasn't, not at the start. That was a failing on my part." A faint smile touched her lips. "I won't make that mistake again." Musk smirked slightly, adjusting his papers. "Good," he said. "Because next time I might actually need a lawyer." Thornwald let out a quiet chuckle, shaking her head as she extended a hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Musk." He shook it firmly, and with that he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind not just a victory, but a legacy that had changed the rules of the game. A week after the trial, Judge Beatrix Thornwald found herself walking through the sleek, glass-walled corridors of Musk Innovations, a setting vastly different from the wood-paneled courtroom where she had spent decades presiding over legal battles. She had retired from the bench just a month after the Magnatech ruling, 30 years was enough, she had told reporters. But something about this invitation had intrigued her. Musk had personally reached out, asking her to visit his lab. Not for another legal matter, not for a hearing, but simply to talk. She was led to a private conference room overlooking a testing facility where engineers moved with purpose, assembling something she didn't quite recognize. When Musk entered, dressed in his usual casual attire, he greeted her with an easy nod. "Beatrix," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "Thanks for coming," she said, still uncertain why she was here. "I have to admit," she said, glancing around, "this isn't where I expected to find myself after retirement." Musk smirked slightly, leaning back. "I wanted to talk to you about something that didn't come up in court." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I knew who you were before the trial," he said simply. "Not just as a judge, as an engineer." Her breath caught for a fraction of a second. Musk continued, watching her reaction. "Beatrix Thornwald, MIT graduate, early pioneer in energy storage. You developed a revolutionary battery prototype in the 1980s, years ahead of its time. But a company called Vertex Tech stole it, claimed the patent. You didn't have the resources to fight them, so you pivoted, went to law school, became a judge." He folded his arms. "You spent your career enforcing the law because you couldn't afford to fight for your own invention." She stared at him, stunned. "How did you—" "I do my research," he said simply. "And I knew from day one that you weren't just another judge. You were someone who understood exactly what it felt like to have an invention stolen." He leaned forward slightly. "That's why I knew you'd see the truth when it mattered." For the first time in years, Beatrix Thornwald was speechless. For a long moment, Beatrix Thornwald simply looked at Elon Musk, her mind processing the weight of what he had just said. It had been decades since she had last thought about her own lost invention, the bitter experience that had driven her away from engineering and into the law. She had buried that part of herself under years of judicial rulings and legal proceedings, convincing herself that it was the past, something she could never change. And yet, here was Musk, sitting across from her, proving that he had seen through everything, through the robes, the gavel, the authority of the bench, to the person she had once been. Slowly, she exhaled, leaning back in her chair. "You knew all of this during the trial?" she asked, her voice measured. Musk nodded. "I did. And I knew that once you saw the evidence, once you saw what Magnetic had done, it wouldn't just be a legal matter for you, it would be personal." Thornwald studied him carefully, trying to find any trace of arrogance, of manipulation in his words. But there was none. There was no gloating, no satisfaction in having outmaneuvered her, just a quiet understanding between two people who had seen the same injustice from different angles. She chuckled lightly, shaking her head. "I should be offended that you played me like that." Musk smirked. "Played you? No, I just understood my audience." She laughed at that, a genuine laugh that surprised even her. "Well," she said, resting her hands on the table, "I suppose you were right. I did see the truth, and I suppose a part of me did take satisfaction in making sure justice was served." Musk nodded. "That's why I asked you here." He slid a folder across the table toward her. "You spent your career making sure innovators got a fair shot. I could use someone like that on my team." She arched an eyebrow. "You're offering me a job?" "Not just a job," Musk corrected, "a partnership. You understand both technology and the law. Most lawyers don't. Most engineers don't. That makes you rare." Thornwald looked down at the folder, then back at Musk. For the first time in decades, she felt something stir in her, a spark of the person she had once been. She reached for the folder, flipping it open, and as she read, she knew her career wasn't over. It was about to begin again in an entirely new way. Beatrix Thornwald turned the crisp pages of the folder Musk had slid across the table, scanning the details of what was undeniably an unconventional job offer. The proposal was clear. Musk wasn't just offering her a position at his company. He wanted her to lead an entirely new division dedicated to protecting innovation, ensuring that what had happened to her in the past, and what Magnetic had just attempted, would never happen again. It wasn't just about legal strategy. It was about building a defense system for ideas, a way to shield inventors, engineers, and entrepreneurs from the kind of corporate theft that had almost cost him his breakthrough. She exhaled, sitting back in her chair. "You really think I'd want to jump back into this world?" she asked, watching Musk carefully. "I just retired." Musk smirked. "You retired from the courtroom. That doesn't mean you're done fighting." She let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "You're bold, I'll give you that." She glanced at the contract again, then back at Musk. "What exactly would my role be?" Musk leaned forward slightly. "I want to build something no company has ever had before. A dedicated division that protects our intellectual property before it even becomes a courtroom battle. We don't just react when someone tries to steal from us. We make sure they never get close in the first place. And I need someone who understands both sides of the fight." Thornwald raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me to be your corporate shield?" Musk nodded. "And a sword when necessary." He tapped the table. "You know how these companies operate. You know how they think. You spent decades watching them manipulate the legal system to their advantage. I need someone who knows the law well enough to make sure no one ever pulls another Magnatech on us." She considered that for a moment, weighing the offer in her mind. It was a challenge, an opportunity to do something more than just preside over disputes. This was a chance to be proactive, to shape the very rules that companies like Magnatech had long exploited. And, perhaps more importantly, it was a way to finally fight back against the kind of corporate theft that had driven her away from engineering all those years ago. "I have to admit," she said finally, "I didn't expect to walk away from that trial with a job offer." Musk shrugged. "Did you expect to walk into that trial and completely change your opinion of me?" Thornwald smirked. "Fair point." She tapped her fingers against the folder, then looked him in the eye. "I'll need time to think about it." Musk nodded, as if he had already anticipated her answer. "Take your time. But you and I both know that you're not the type to walk away when there's still work to be done." Thornwald glanced out the window, taking in the bustling energy of Musk's facility. The engineers in the distance working on projects that would shape the future. She had spent her career enforcing laws written by others, laws that had too often been bent in favor of the powerful. Maybe it was time to do something different. Maybe it was time to write the rules herself. She looked back at Musk and smirked. "I'll get back to you soon." Musk simply grinned. "I'll be waiting." Beatrix Thornwald sat alone in her home office that evening, the folder Musk had given her resting on the polished mahogany desk in front of her. The room was filled with remnants of her long career. Framed certificates, legal textbooks with worn spines, photos of herself shaking hands with dignitaries, and the gavel she had used for nearly 2 decades. It was a space built on judgment, order, and the enforcement of laws written by others. But for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if that was enough anymore. She took a deep breath and turned to the window, watching the fading light stretch across the city skyline. The courtroom had been her battlefield for 3 decades, a place where she had fought for fairness, upheld justice, and ensured that the law served those it was meant to protect. But looking back now, she saw the limits of her role. The law didn't always favor the right people. It didn't always prevent theft disguised as innovation. Didn't always stop corporations from using legal loopholes to crush the very minds who were driving progress forward. She had seen it happen to herself, and now she had seen it happen again. To Musk. She had thought she was done fighting. Retirement was supposed to be her time to step back, to finally rest after a lifetime spent on the bench. But as she stood there, staring out at the horizon, she realized that rest wasn't what she wanted. She had spent her entire career enforcing rules others had written. What Musk was offering her was something entirely different, a chance to create the rules, to defend innovators before they ever had to step foot in a courtroom, to take all of her experience, all of her knowledge, and apply it where it could actually change the game. She glanced back at the folder. The details were clear. Musk wanted her to lead a new division dedicated to protecting intellectual property, preventing corporate espionage before it started, and crafting legal defenses that companies like Magnatech wouldn't be able to sidestep. It was a role designed for someone who understood both the courtroom and the mind of an inventor, someone who had lived both sides of the fight. She smirked, shaking her head at the irony. For years, she had ruled on patent disputes, deciding cases for and against people like Musk. Now, he was offering her a seat at the table to shape the very battle she once presided over. She reached for her phone, dialing the number Musk had left at the bottom of the contract. He answered on the first ring. "Beatrick," he said, as if he already knew why she was calling. She leaned back in her chair, a rare grin tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're right," she said. "I'm not done yet." Musk chuckled on the other end. "Welcome to the future." Months later, Beatrix Thornwald stood at the glass-walled overlook of a state-of-the-art research facility, watching the engineers below work on technology that would define the next era of energy storage. The hum of machinery, the soft beeping of diagnostic screens, the quiet discussions of scientists poring over data, it was all so different from the solemnity of a courtroom, yet she felt more at home here than she had in years. The past few months had been a whirlwind. Leaving behind her identity as a judge, stepping into this new role as the head of Musk Innovations' Intellectual Property and Ethics Division, and immersing herself in a world where the law wasn't just enforced, but proactively shaped to protect the very foundation of innovation. Behind her, the glass door slid open with a soft hiss. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "What do you think?" Musk's voice was relaxed, carrying the same quiet confidence that had unnerved her when they first met in court. She crossed her arms, still gazing down at the research lab. "I think I should have done this years ago." Musk chuckled, stepping beside her. "Better late than ever," she smirked, then let her expression grow serious. "I've spent my career watching technology outpace the law, watching companies manipulate legal loopholes to steal, delay, and bury true innovation under layers of bureaucracy." She turned to face him. "But now, we're in a position to change that." Musk nodded. "Exactly. The tech industry has operated under the assumption that laws are reactive, that by the time the legal system catches up, it's too late to undo the damage." He glanced at her. "I want us to change that assumption." Thornwald exhaled slowly, glancing back at the lab. "It's going to be a fight. More companies will try what Magnatech did, maybe even worse." Musk smirked. "Let them try." The world was shifting, and they both knew it. AI, renewable energy, space exploration. The next decade would redefine human progress. But with that progress would come new challenges. More Magnatechs, more corporate espionage, more legal gray areas that companies would exploit for profit. The old ways of dealing with it, waiting for lawsuits, reacting after the damage was done, weren't enough anymore. Thornwald glanced at the tablet in her hand, where the details of their latest project were displayed. Not just new patents, but new legal frameworks, protections that would make it impossible for bad actors to steal and manipulate innovation the way Magnatech had tried to. She had spent her life interpreting the law. Now she was helping to write the future. Musk watched her, then said, "You are a damn good judge, Beatrix." She smirked, locking eyes with him. "Now let's make sure no one like me ever has to clean up another Magnatech again." Musk nodded. "Let's build something no one can steal." And with that, they turned back to the lab. Two minds from different worlds, now united in one mission, not just to create the future of technology, but to protect it. The story of Elon Musk's legal battle against Magnatech is more than just a corporate courtroom drama. It carries profound lessons about integrity, perseverance, and the power of strategic thinking. For those who have lived long enough to witness the rapid evolution of technology and business, this story serves as a reminder that wisdom, experience, and resilience will always outweigh deception and greed. One of the most striking lessons from this case is that true innovation cannot be stolen. It must be earned. Throughout history, countless inventors and thinkers have been exploited by powerful corporations that sought to profit from their ideas. Many of those innovators lacked the resources or legal knowledge to fight back, resigning themselves to the reality that the system was unfair. But Musk's approach was different. He didn't just fight back. He did so with patience, intelligence, and an understanding that the long game always wins. In life, we often encounter people or organizations that try to take shortcuts at the expense of others, whether in business, politics, or personal relationships. The lesson here is clear. Those who rely on dishonesty may see temporary success, but they will ultimately fall. The world rewards those who persist, who stay true to their values, and who refuse to be intimidated by those in positions of power. Another powerful takeaway is the importance of adapting to challenges with a strategic mindset. When Musk first entered the courtroom, Judge Beatrix Thornwald, the opposing attorneys, and even the media assumed he was unprepared. Instead of trying to prove them wrong immediately, he let them believe what they wanted. He played into their expectations, allowing his opponents to become overconfident. Then, when the moment was right, he revealed his strategy and turned the case against them. This is a valuable lesson for anyone, especially older adults who have spent decades navigating life's ups and downs. There will always be moments when people underestimate us, whether because of age, background, or circumstances. But instead of being discouraged, we should use that to our advantage. Patience, knowledge, and experience are the greatest weapons against arrogance. Judge Thornwald's transformation in this story also offers an important reflection on growth and humility. Despite her decades of experience in law, she made an initial assumption about Musk based on her own biases. But instead of clinging to that judgment, she recognized her mistake, acknowledged it, and allowed herself to learn and evolve. Too often, people become set in their ways, believing that their past experiences give them all the answers. But real wisdom comes from being open to new perspectives, even when they challenge what we think we know. No matter how much we've learned, life always has more to teach us, if we are willing to listen. Finally, this story highlights the importance of leaving behind a legacy of fairness and protection. Thornwald could have retired and walked away from the legal world forever, but instead, she chose to use her experience to make a lasting impact. Musk gave her an opportunity not just to enforce the law, but to shape the future. As we grow older, many of us wonder what mark we will leave behind. Will we simply let time pass, or will we use our knowledge and skills to protect and uplift those who come after us? Whether it's through mentoring, guiding family members, or standing up for what's right, we all have the ability to use our experiences to create a better world. In the end, Musk's courtroom battle was not just about winning a case. It was about defending innovation, proving that justice still matters, and reminding the world that true strength comes not from wealth or power, but from perseverance, intelligence, and integrity. These are lessons that transcend generations, ones that people of all ages, especially those who have seen the cycles of life, can take to heart and apply in their own ways.